First contact, sheep among lions. The Galactic Council had seen Earth, scanned its atmosphere, and measured its weak military infrastructure from orbit. What they found was a curious, disorganized species with volatile emotions, primitive governments, and a fascination with violence that rarely translated into efficient tactics. The consensus? Harmless. They didn't say it with malice, just a quiet, superior certainty. The Zalari Collective, an alliance of peace-driven species, extended an invitation to humanity for cultural exchange and scientific integration. They did not fear Earth's warships or nuclear weapons. To the Zalari, humanity was a relic of a less evolved age, noisy, passionate, and tragically inefficient. So when Earth dispatched Staff Sergeant Michael Rains as part of a security liaison to the neutral moon of Korath 5, it was mostly symbolic. Rains was told his role was protection, yes, but mostly to observe and report. The real warriors, everyone believed, were the Zalari peacekeepers. Rains had other thoughts. You don't send a Marine unless you expect trouble, he muttered during the shuttle descent. Korath 5 was a quiet, diplomatic outpost, home to scientists and representatives from over a dozen species. Crystalline towers and glowing pathways lit the alien city in calm, soothing hues. To Rains, it looked like a theme park run by committee. Beautiful, yes, but fragile. He wasn't wrong. On the 6th day of his assignment, the Karnathi reclaimers struck. The Karnathi were a warrior race splintered from the collective, resentful of peace and craving dominance. Their ships pierced Korath's skies without warning, bypassing orbital defenses using cloak drives. By the time the alarms blared, ground troops were already deploying. The peacekeepers froze. Their protocols required consensus, authorization, and de-escalation attempts. Rains drew his sidearm and ran toward the chaos. He wasn't the only human stationed there. 3 others joined him, escorting civilian groups through winding corridors while the Karnathi swept through the research domes. But Rains moved differently. Where the Zalari hesitated, he attacked. Where they flanked cautiously, he set traps. "Sir," one of the peacekeepers stammered, "your tactics, they're irregular." Rains ducked behind a collapsed column, returned fire with precision, then grinned. "Irregular is what we do best." The humans fought tooth and nail. Rains led a last stand at the communication spire, holding the Karnathi back long enough to broadcast a distress beacon and evacuate over 70 civilians. When the tower finally fell, he was still firing, until his rifle clicked dry. Then he picked up a Karnathi plasma spear and fought until they dragged him down, unconscious but grinning. He awoke in a containment cell of glass and static. Above him stood a tall, heavily armored figure with translucent scales and glowing red eyes. Strategist Vorokan, commander of the assault. "You are different from the others," the alien rasped in a guttural tone. "You did not flee. You wounded 8 of my warriors." "Why?" Rains sat up slowly, rubbing his bruised jaw. "Because running's never been our first instinct. You were a soldier? A Marine. Your world was deemed non-hostile. You were not supposed to resist." Rains chuckled. "Yeah, well, you misread the species profile." Vorokan tilted his head. "Then enlighten me, human. What are your war tactics?" The Marine leaned back, blood drying on his sleeve. His smile was small, but it carried the weight of millennia. "You got time to listen?" Rains asked. "I have all the time in the universe." "Good," Rains said, "because I'm about to explain why that word, tactics, means something very different on Earth." And just like that, the balance of the galaxy began to shift, not with weapons, not with armies, but with a single conversation. The lesson begins. Strategist Vorokan sat in the observation chamber, watching the human Marine through a shimmering force field. Staff Sergeant Michael Rains sat calmly, legs spread, arms resting on his knees like he was in a briefing room rather than a prison. "You understand," Vorokan said, voice filtered through an overhead speaker, "that resistance was unnecessary. You could have surrendered. We are not monsters." Rains looked up slowly. "You invaded a neutral zone. You opened fire on civilians. And now you want to talk morals?" "We seek understanding," the Karnathi leader said, ignoring the accusation. Our scans showed no strategic planning in your actions, yet they were effective. Unpredictable. You improvised. Why? Because that's what war is, Rains said. It's not a chess match. It's not a list of pre-approved plays. It's chaos. And the side that adapts fastest wins. Vorokan's crest fluttered with mild agitation. That is not how warfare works in the galactic community. Honor, code, clarity, predictable conflict ensures minimized destruction. That's adorable, Rains muttered. You find our doctrine amusing? I find it suicidal. Vorokan's patience frayed, but curiosity anchored him. He entered the cell personally, unarmed. The guards tensed, but he waved them off. He wanted to understand the anomaly in front of him. This human. Tell me, Marine, the strategist said, standing tall over Rains. What exactly are human war tactics? Rains looked him dead in the eye. You ever heard of a thing called Operation Fortitude? Vorokan blinked. No, it was during our Second World War. We built entire armies out of rubber and air. Inflatable tanks, dummy planes, fake radio chatter. We even had actors playing generals. All to convince the enemy we'd invade one place while we stormed another. You used decoys? We made them believe in a ghost army. The enemy moved their forces to meet an illusion and left the real front wide open. Vorokan frowned. That is deception. Dishonorable. That's survival, Rains said. You call it dishonor, we call it strategy. We've faked surrenders, sabotaged our own infrastructure to deny it to the enemy, even set forests on fire to trap our pursuers. And when we had nothing left, we threw rocks. This is madness. This is humanity. Vorokan turned, pacing slowly. You ignore rules. You embrace destruction. Rains leaned forward. We create rules and break them when we must. Because when someone threatens our people, we don't care about optics or tradition. We care about winning. Silence stretched between them. Rains broke it first. You thought we were harmless because we didn't strike first. But we never claimed to be peaceful. We just had bigger threats at home. Each other. You wage war on your own kind. For centuries, continents burned. Cities leveled. We learned every way to kill each other and every way to survive. Vorokan narrowed his eyes. And what did you learn in the end? Rains stood, stepping just within the limit of the field. We learned that war is about pressure, about turning the enemy's mind against them. Fear, confusion, despair. Win those, and the body follows. The strategist stared at him. For the first time, there was hesitation. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I want you to understand what you're up against. You thought you'd win by force. But you've already lost the moment you made humans think like soldiers again. A chime sounded at the cell's control panel. One of the Karnathi aides entered urgently. Strategist, you need to see this. The human rescue ships, they've changed course. They're not heading for the diplomatic outpost. Vorokan turned. Then where are they going? The aide hesitated. They're surrounding our main communication tower, our central relay hub. Rain smiled without teeth. You really should have taken my advice, he said. Never give humans time to plan. You'll never like what they come up with. Unleashing the monster. The Karnathi command station pulsed with quiet panic. Red-lit panels blinked across the room like warning eyes. Strategist Vorokan moved quickly through the central corridor, his tail rigid with tension. Report, he barked. A subordinate turned from console. 3 human corvettes are jamming our relay frequencies. No signals are getting off-world. They're using a rotating signal disruptor, patterned but adaptive. Our AI can't counter it. Vorokan clenched his jaw. Adaptive jamming? That wasn't standard Zalari tech. That was Earth-made, dirty, imprecise, and dangerously effective. They're cutting us off before we can retaliate, the aide added. It's not an assault. It's isolation. Rain's words echoed in the strategist's mind. War is about pressure. He returned to the holding cells, but found the door ajar. 2 guards were unconscious on the ground. One was missing his helmet. Inside, the cell was empty. Staff Sergeant Michael Rains moved like a shadow through the Karnathi facility. The stolen helmet muffled his breathing. His rifle, taken from a fallen enemy during his earlier stand, hung from his shoulder. But he wasn't here to shoot. Not yet. He had one job: cripple their command structure. And to do that, he needed to make them turn on each other. He slipped into a maintenance shaft, following schematics he'd memorized while pretending to cooperate during earlier interrogations. The aliens had underestimated him, thinking him a captured soldier. They never imagined he'd memorize security routes and relay access codes in silence. He reached a terminal hub. Within seconds, he accessed the station's AI, using a crude, brute force method that would have appalled Zalari engineers. But it worked. The lights dimmed. Doors across the facility began opening and closing at random. Alarms sounded, conflicting, overlapping, creating confusion. In the command center, chaos erupted. "We're under internal assault," a Karnathi officer shouted. "Systems compromised." Vorokin stared at the screens. Cameras flickered, power fluctuated, and enemy markers were appearing inside the facility. "Is it human forces?" he demanded. "No confirmed landings," the aide replied. "It's him." By the time Vorokin reached the armory, it was too late. Rains had already been there. Weapons were missing. Explosives planted. One hallway had collapsed entirely, triggered by a thermal detonator placed under a coolant pipe. And then the speakers crackled to life. Rain's voice, calm and clear, boomed through every chamber. "Let me tell you about a place called Fallujah." His voice was casual, conversational. "Urban warfare, close quarters, hostile population, no safe zones. We went in with gear, left with scars. And the worst part? You never knew who your enemy was. Because sometimes they were waiting." Vorokin stared up at the speaker. "This is not a battle," Rains continued. "This is a lesson. You don't trap a human in your house. You just give him access to your tools." Outside the facility, human reinforcements landed. Small, precise units, strike teams trained for extraction and sabotage. They moved under cover of the communications blackout, aided by the very chaos Rains had created. The Karnathi garrison, still disoriented, couldn't mount a defense. By the time they realized what was happening, 2 hangars were sealed, a 3rd was sabotaged, and Rains was already en route to rendezvous. When a Marine emerged from the shadows and into the floodlights of the evac shuttle, he didn't look like a prisoner. He looked like a ghost. Later, aboard the UHS Caliban, Rains sat across from Commander Elira Thorne, human envoy to the Zalari delegation. "You escaped using their own systems," she said, flipping through the report, "and turned their facility into a training exercise." Rains shrugged. "They asked about our tactics. I gave them a demo." She looked at him for a long moment. "They think we're monsters now." "We're not monsters," Rains said. "We're just really good at war." The Zalari Council convened 3 days later in a private emergency session. The Karnathi demanded sanctions. The humans offered doctrine manuals. No one dared laugh. And for the first time in generations, the galaxy realized the most terrifying species was not the strongest or the largest. It was the one who treated war like art, the war they didn't expect. Korth 5 skyline still shimmered in twilight, but now it shimmered under new silence. The Zalari Council Tower, once a beacon of cooperation, was now flanked by automated turrets. Human-made, sleek, functional, efficient. Staff Sergeant Michael Rains stood before the council again, this time in uniform, not shackles. His face was bruised, his expression impassive. On either side of him stood 2 Zalari security advisors, more for appearances than necessity. Strategist Vorokin was there too. He no longer stood tall. "We lost 32 soldiers," he said, his voice cold but measured. 3 landing ships were damaged. A relay station was rendered inoperable. One human caused this. Counselor Leia, a Zalari diplomat with crystalline skin and piercing silver eyes, looked toward Rains. "And yet, you did not kill indiscriminately. Civilians were not harmed. In fact, you protected dozens, including some of ours." Rains gave a nod. Because the mission was never about killing. It was about sending a message. Counselor Leia leaned forward. "And what message is that?" Rains met her gaze. "That we're not harmless. We're just patient." There was a pause, long, tense, almost sacred. The kind of silence that happens before a seismic shift in history. Back aboard the UHS Caliban, Rains found himself facing a different kind of debriefing. Commander Elira Thorne stood at the viewport, watching alien ships realign their orbit. "You realize what you've done," she said. "There will be no going back to diplomatic niceties. The galaxy just learned what happens when you corner a human with training and purpose." Rains adjusted his collar. "They needed to learn. And you think this sets a precedent?" "I think," he said, "it reveals one. We didn't invent war, but we evolved with it. It's in our bones, Commander. We didn't bring war to the stars, but if it finds us, we don't flinch. We adapt." She turned. "You're not wrong. But it's one thing to protect yourself, another to build a reputation." Rains walked to the viewport and pointed at a Karnathi destroyer limping back into formation. "That ship? That fleet? They'll think twice before trying again. Not because we're monsters, but because we play smarter. We use what we have. We don't ask for fair odds. We make the enemy regret underestimating us." Thorne stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You just changed Earth's place in the galactic pecking order." Rains looked over his shoulder. "Good. We were getting tired of being called harmless." Months later, reports filtered through neutral systems. Karnathi ships gave Earth a wide berth. Pirate clans stopped targeting human convoys. Entire diplomatic treaties were rewritten with new clauses titled human tactical contingencies. But the most important development? Other species started asking Earth for military advisors. At first, the Council tried to resist it. But too many outposts now understood the reality. When war comes knocking, peacekeepers hesitate. Humans prepare. And in the shadows of negotiations, the new phrase whispered through war rooms and transmission halls alike: "Don't provoke the humans unless you're ready for a kind of war you can't understand." The final log from strategist Voro Khan, intercepted by a Zalari archivist, would become infamous in years to come. "We mistook quiet for weakness. We mistook restraint for incapacity. Humans do not fight like us. They fight to win. And when they rise, they bring the ghosts of every war they've ever survived."